Hi class, how are you today? Why do you feel that way? We'll deal with that another time. The learning target for today is to identify congruent triangles using side, 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 angle, angle, side, and angle, side, angle. I'll get into more of what those mean in a moment. 3, you can identify congruent triangles using those 4. 2, you can identify congruent triangles using those 4 if triangles are not connected. 1, you can identify congruent triangles but cannot state why they are congruent. And 0, you cannot identify congruent triangles. Let's get started.
Alright, so here we go. First we're going to start with SSS. That stands for side, side, side. So that means in each of the triangles, all the sides are congruent. So one side congruent to one side, second side congruent to a second side, and a third side congruent to a third side. And what this means is if you know that all 3 sides of a triangle are congruent to all 3 sides of another triangle, then the entire triangles are congruent to each other. So if you have 2 triangles and all their sides are the same lengths as the other triangle, then you automatically know that the angles are also congruent as well because those triangles are congruent. Next we have side, angle, side. That's where you have a side congruent to another side, and then an angle congruent to another angle, and a second side congruent to a second side. The big part of this is that the angle has to be in between the 2 sides. So you look at the 2 sides that are congruent, it must be the angle that touches both of those sides. So if you have 2 sides that are congruent, and the angle in between them is also congruent, then we know that the entire triangles are congruent. So if you have a side and another side congruent and the angle in between them congruent, you know that the other angles are also congruent, and the third side is also congruent, because the entire triangle is congruent, and all you need to know is side, angle, side. Next is AAS, angle, angle, side. So if you have one angle congruent to another angle, and then a second angle congruent to a second angle, and then a side congruent to another side, then the entire triangles are congruent. So angle, angle, side. Angle, angle, side. That means the entire triangles are congruent. And all you need to know is angle's congruent, another angle's congruent, and a side's congruent. Then finally, angle, side, angle. So that's where we have an angle congruent to another angle, a side congruent to another side, and a second angle congruent to a second angle. Notice similarly with the side, angle, side, angle, side, angle has to be the side in between the two angles, the side that's touching both of these angles here. So, at least for now, these are the 4 postulates that you need to know to be able to tell if two triangles are congruent to each other. Alright, now let's use some of this. So for this, I want you to determine if the two triangles are congruent and how you know. State how you know that they are congruent. So we've got 3 different problems right here. 1, 2, 3. First thing I want you to note is I am a terrible artist. I think you know this by now. So nothing is drawn to scale. Assume these are all straight lines and go from there. Most of geometry you have to assume nothing is drawn to scale anyway. You have to use only what's given to you, not the way things look. Anyway, so the first one, we look and we see we have a side here, and it's congruent to this side over here. This side is congruent to this side over here. So we have 2 sides marked. But that's all they gave us. We need to know, from this picture, can we figure out anything else, if anything else might be congruent? Well, we have one side congruent to one side, so that'll give us a side, then second side congruent to a second side, so another side. So we need one more thing. Well, if you look here, this side of this triangle is congruent to, well, this side of the other triangle, because it's the same side, so we have a third side congruent. So, side, 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 and of course the answer is yes. So yes, because it's side, side, side. Now let's go to the next one. Again, we have side congruent to another side. Then let's look to see if the angle in between these two sides are congruent, because we know this side is congruent to this side, but either it's going to be another side is congruent or the angle in between. So let's look at the angle in between first. So this angle and this angle are formed by these two sides intersecting each other. Well, that means these two are vertical angles. Therefore, they're congruent. So we've got an angle, and then this side is congruent to this side, so we have a side as well. So side, angle, side. So, yes. And then finally, this one over here, we have an angle congruent to another angle, and then they give us a right angle. And that's all they give us. So we need to know, is it congruent and how? So we've got an angle congruent, so I can at least write that part. Angle. Then we've got this right angle here. Well, if we know this angle is a right angle, this angle over here makes a line, so that means it's 180 minus 90, which is also 90. So this side over here is also a right angle. So that means those two are congruent. So I can put another angle. Then we have a side congruent to itself, because this side is shared by both triangles. So we have a side. Angle, angle, side. Yes. So a lot of what you'll be doing next class is looking at different triangles and trying to tell whether or not the triangles are congruent and how you know that they're congruent, whether it's side, 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 angle, angle, side, or angle, side, angle. Alright, so here's one more type of example we'll be dealing with. So here it says, state the parts of each triangle that need to be congruent to satisfy congruence by ASA. So we're looking at a triangle here, two triangles, and we want to know, in order for these triangles to satisfy congruence by angle, side, angle, so for them to be congruent because of angle, side, angle, what other parts need to be congruent to each other? So let's start out by looking at what parts are congruent to each other. We know that AC is congruent to CE. Okay? We also know, because these angles, angle DCE is congruent to angle ACB, those two angles are made by DB and AE intersecting, so that means these two angles are congruent. So we know ACB and DCE are congruent. So we have an angle that's congruent, and we have a side that's congruent. So an angle and a side, we need a third angle. And it has to be the other angle that is touching the side in the middle. So if an angle here and a side here, the other angle this side is touching is this one right here, angle E. And over here, we know this angle and this angle, the other one that this side is touching is angle A. So, for this to be true, angle A has to be congruent to angle E. And if that was true, then these two triangles would be congruent because of ASA.
Alright, now time for the sponge activity. State whether each pair of triangles is congruent and why. So, yes or no, are they congruent? And then state the reason they are congruent if they are congruent. So, side, 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 that kind of stuff. Alright, so in number 1, we're dealing with these two triangles. In number 2, these two triangles. Number 3, these two triangles. Once again, please make sure to take notes in the entire lesson. Tempt the sponge. Go back, rank yourself, take a picture of your notes, submit it all to your backpack, and have a good night.